thank you all for taking some of your time at the conference to hear a little bit about First Analysis and what we do. I realize there's a lot going on here, and everyone's time is valuable. Really appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me here. Going to talk about who we are, what we do, and then give some overview of what we think is happening in the space generally in talent technology, human capital technology. Hopefully share some insights that are of interest. If there are, I understand there's a microphone somewhere. If there are questions as we go along, I don't know if that's technologically feasible, but please speak up. Otherwise, maybe some time at the end. First Analysis is a 36-year-old firm where we focus on investment research in very specific industries that we think have significant long-term growth potential. And we use that research in a few different ways. We're a little bit different from any other firm that I'm aware of. There's a little bit of some similarity with some of the things that GSV does, but relatively unique. Those activities are that we make direct investments in private companies in the industries that we focus on, companies that we think have enough traction to prove out that there is a there product market fit, and are on a meaningful growth trajectory where bringing a new investor who not only has the capital but also significant expertise in their specific area can help them take that growth to the next level. Alongside that, what makes us different from any other firm that does that activity, we also have a sell-side research and investment banking group where the same people are doing both the venture investing and the research. So my two hats are I'm a partner in our venture fund and lead deals in the human capital technology space, and that's throughout the chain. And as we go through here, I'll define kind of how we view the space and where it's heading. But it's everything. We've done things from early stage education through higher ed, through corporate, throughout the HR world as well. And our view is that these worlds, while they've been largely separate for a long time, that they are increasingly converging for a whole bunch of reasons. And that's a big part of our thesis about the space. So we publish research on the public companies that are doing interesting things in these areas, and that includes everything from the publicly traded post-secondary providers through technology providers like 2U and Instructure that are focused on the space, all the way through the HR component of human capital. So I also write research on Workday and Cornerstones and the leaders in that area. And I'm one of 14 people who do this, and my area is almost entirely human capital technology, this area that we're talking about. I have colleagues that focus on other industries that we think have similar growth potential. So I have colleagues that focus on healthcare IT, Internet of Things, financial technology, marketing technology. And we really we try to be at the center of the thought ecosystem around these areas by publishing these reports that go very widely to people in the industries as well as investors. Hopefully put out some interesting ideas that generate dialogue that ultimately lead to both opportunities for the investors who use our research and also direct opportunities for our venture funds. And then with the sell-side research, all these reports that we write are going to the large fund managers, folks like Fidelity and Janus, the household names, as well as smaller investors who use our research to help make decisions on which public companies they should be buying, selling, or holding. My area specifically is human capital technology, and as I mentioned, that's education through HR technologies. At the top of this slide is the list of the public companies that I produce research on. We monitor a number of private companies that we think are kind of the up-and-comers of the future. Maybe they'll be public, maybe they'll be acquired by public companies. And then we make direct investments, as I mentioned. So the 5 companies listed at the bottom there, these are human capital technology companies running the range from learning.com, which is a platform for bringing technology into largely the K through 8, some K through 12 classroom, up through Yellow, which is a recruiting technology company. Actually, they will be here presenting tomorrow. Up through NetChecks, which is a talent management technology, payroll technology company. So really up and down the chain. This slide, while slightly detailed, tries to encapsulate the uniqueness of what we do. Everything starts with research. which then goes out in the form of these reports and also extensive white papers, which I'll get to in a moment here. But so reports on specific companies, but also deep thought pieces on the industries where we're focused, the trends, and we also profile private companies in those white papers. Those go to more than 7,000 people, and those include investors, both venture investors and public company money managers that use the research to make investment decisions. They go to operators, private companies that value the research and that use it to help them map out their strategic path, as well as public companies that we cover that also get the research. I see some representatives in the room who are familiar with that, so I'll let them speak after this to whether they find it valuable. But hopefully, the fact that we're focused not just on kind of the high-end, largest providers in spaces, but also on the private companies, provides a pretty differentiated angle. Our view is that if all you're doing is looking at startups, you're missing the big picture, and if all you're doing is looking at public companies, then you're probably missing the next up-and-coming thing that's going to be disruptive. So we try to do both those things. That all leads to returns, both for our own funds. We've raised 12 venture capital funds over the years. These are traditional structured funds. The investors are kind of the who's who type. It's fund of funds, family offices, pension funds, foundations, some individuals. By virtue of the fact that we build all these relationships, we have really good sort of rapport with people who decide they want to put money in the funds directly because they've made money on a deal, or they're fund managers who know us from our research. So always looking to build relationships with those types of folks, as well as with the companies that we think could be investment opportunities or ultimately public companies. Then, looks like there may be a slide missing, so that's fine. I had a slide in here about, with a specific example before I get on to some of the research. Over the past 2 years, we've published 3 separate white papers laying out our thesis on this space, broadly speaking, human capital technology. We started with one on talent acquisition technology, where we profiled not only the bellwethers like LinkedIn, but also the private companies that we thought were doing interesting things in the area. We then followed that up with one on talent development technology, which was largely corporate focused, but technologies that are sort of beyond the LMS. What are the interesting things happening in learning technology on the corporate side that we think is going to be disruptive? What's going to make learning not just a compliance function, but really a strategic value creator for employers? And then recently, earlier this year, we published one on talent performance and engagement technology, which discussed once you have the right people in the seats, you've got them what they need to learn and progress in their careers. How do you keep them engaged? Why is it important to keep them engaged? And what is the value you can create for an organization by doing that? Those 3 white papers, all these things we publish, by the way, my goal is to have as many people in this ecosystem receiving our research as possible. So if you do not receive it, this just goes out to the whole ecosystem. Please come up to me afterwards. If you watch this online afterwards, my email address is in the presentation, greendale@firstanalysis.com. Please reach out to me, and I would be very happy to put you on our distribution list, both to send you the previous reports I mentioned, if those are of interest, and as well as our future reports, which you would get automatically. And all these reports are featuring 50, 60 private companies, sort of laying out a taxonomy of who we think is doing interesting things and should be watched in the future. So our thesis on the space generally, actually, you know what? This is totally out of order, not even marginally out of order. You know what? Would it be possible if I have a zip drive or a flash drive that we could replace it with this? Plan B, right. I think what happened is I uploaded a presentation to meet the deadline, but then I subsequently reordered it. Any questions in the meantime? Anything I can tell you about anything?
I noticed you have a list of technologies, and I'm just curious to see if you have ever looked into. Sorry. Now, switch. Hello. Okay.
Sorry? Oh, the microphone.
Hello. Have you ever considered looking into using blockchain to help manage student credentials?
So I think there's a lot of interesting use cases for blockchain. So I've not specifically looked at that per se. We've looked at it for a number of other use cases within our fund, and certainly we've looked at the whole credentialing and are there sort of interim steps. So the answer is conceptually yes, specifically no. Although if you have thoughts on that, I'd love to hear more about it. Is this the replacement one? Great. You know what? This is exactly the same. So I don't know if it's just, you know what I will do here? I will take this in the order it's here, and that's fine. So all this research is sort of the question we were asking ourselves is where are the opportunities in human capital? Sort of why is this an interesting area? Is it an investable area? Obviously, there's sort of this generic idea that you need to have the right people in the right places with the right knowledge. But can we validate that? Is there data to suggest sort of that's the right intuition? And specifically, where in that are the interesting opportunities? So I'd mentioned the talent engagement. So once you have people in the organization, what do you do to keep them there and keep them productive? And is this an important question? So just some very basic data on a national basis. What's happening in human capital? There's an instinct that there is a war for talent and people need different knowledge than they have. But sort of why is that important? So we looked at kind of productivity data. This slide shows data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It just shows the change in unit labor costs over time. And just keep this number in your head. So recently the change in unit labor costs has been rising about 2% a year. On the other hand, if you look at the productivity change, particularly since the end of the recession, it's actually going up at a shockingly low rate. This is also data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. On an annual basis, productivity is going up a little over 1% a year. That is somewhat counterintuitive, given that you have so much new technology being brought to bear. You would think that productivity of individuals would be increasing. Well, it is, but not very much. And if you put these two pieces of data together, a 1.1% increase on average annually post-recession in productivity, combine that with a closer to 2% increase in the cost, it suggests that this gap is widening. In other words, what companies are getting from their employees is actually diminishing returns at this point. You're getting less productivity increases than you're seeing increases in what you're paying those people. So this sort of validates the instinct that there's got to be something we can do to increase the productivity of people, and it's not simply investing in technologies that replace people. We're doing some of that, and you're seeing this kind of change in the equation. So there's got to be a way to bring technology to bear to increase the productivity of your people in order to get this equation to go the other direction. I'm going to jump around this a little bit because this is so out of order here. We validated the question of, so there's data to suggest this is going to be an important issue. Important if you're looking at investments is, are you thinking 10 years ahead? Are you thinking 20 years ahead, 2 years ahead? Because you could have the greatest idea of the world, and if the market isn't ready for it, it's not going to work out. So we also looked at data on kind of how are companies thinking about this. This is survey data from Brandon Hall asking companies of all sizes, what are the most important things you have to be focused on in order to be successful over the next several years? And it could be anything. It's R&D, technologies. And the number one most important thing they said was our people strategy. That's even more important to us than business strategy or sales strategy, which is somewhat surprising. You would think companies would say, okay, HR, that's okay, we got to have that. But sales is really important. But no, they actually believe that people strategy is going to be the most important determinant of success over the next several years. Similarly, this data from PwC, a human capital report they put out every year, talking about kind of what are the most important things that they're focused on, CEOs of larger employers, and also saying talent, getting the right talent in the right place at the top of their priority list as well. So companies are aware that people are important. You have this productivity gap, which is kind of going the wrong direction. And then the question is, sort of, how do you solve that? So one of our portfolio companies I mentioned is called Yellow. It's in the recruiting technology space. Their claim to fame is they're the leader in, they started as the leader in helping large employers recruit, locate, and attract candidates from colleges. It's used extensively at career fairs, event-based recruiting, and particularly for identifying talent that may not be at the top 2% of schools that every employer knows you should be recruiting at, but it's not always obvious. Should you be spending a bunch of time at East Lansing University or Southeast Omaha University? Their technology is used for that. They've expanded beyond that to the broader professional recruiting space. As part of that investment, we did a lot of research into this question of talent acquisition. If you're not familiar with that world, there is an expression, the war for talent. A lot of people in that area don't like that because it sounds belligerent, but there is increasingly talent is a seller's market. The data to kind of underscore that, the unemployment rate, everyone knows, has been coming down since the end of the recession. Additional data, the number of unemployed people per job opening has been increasingly sloping down. There just aren't enough people to fill the roles that are out there. Also important, this is a cyclical phenomenon given the state of the economy. There's data to suggest this is also a secular phenomenon, that even if we were to go into a downturn at some point, while it may sort of loosen up the labor market a little bit, the size of the entry-level labor market, purely based on demographics and trends about when people enter the labor force, is expected to decrease. So these are entry-level people ages 16 to 24. That population entering the workforce is expected to decline 13% in the 10 years ended 2024. And while the overall labor force is still growing, that growth is coming disproportionately from older adults, 55 and up. It's obviously really important to have those newer people coming in. If you have a lack of supply, over time, if you don't get those people now, it's going to be really hard to make that up in the future. And obviously, those people will be the leaders of employers down the road. So you have this kind of cyclical phenomenon that you have a really tight labor market, and then you have a secular phenomenon that it's really hard to find the entry-level people. And then, of course, you have to keep them there, and that leads to engagement. So all of this research led to our investment in Yellow, and also underscores what we think is an important trend in the industry generally. I'm certain that speaking in this venue that I'm somewhat preaching to the choir, but this is an enormous challenge that we have to solve, that finding the right people, getting them the skills they need, and then keeping them around, this is going to be a massive problem for employers over the next 10 years and beyond. And I think employers, that survey data I suggested, are increasingly aware of that. That chart, by the way, if you looked at that 10 years ago, it was not always the case that people would have been at the top of the list. There were other concerns on large employers' minds. So to the point about keeping people around, there is a whole world, and I don't know if people are familiar with this, increasingly attracting talent is not just about putting an ad on Monster. It is, you have to build relationships with people over time. They have to want to work at your company. They have to feel an affinity for it, much in the way that they would feel an affinity for a brand as a consumer. Employers are increasingly aware that they need to build brands as employers. If you don't do that, first of all, it's going to be hard attracting talent. Second of all, this is data from surveys. There are surveys on employee engagement, and the number of people who are willing to work at a company with a bad reputation decreasing over time. There's this interesting split between men and women, which I don't know that I fully understand, but generally the slope is down, and I think that is going to continue given the demographic trends we're talking about, and because there are employers who are leaders in this area who do a really good job of conveying their employer brand, making sure that they stay in touch with potential candidates, that it's not just we'll find you when the time is right, but rather we need to build a pipeline of talent, people who have the right skills, who want to work for us. Because if you don't, you're not going to find them, and if you do find them, they're not going to stick around very long. more data underscoring this instinct. This is data from Deloitte, where they looked at different talent trends and the discrepancy between how important employers think these things are and how ready they are. And the biggest discrepancy is in learning and development. A huge issue where you don't have the people you need, and if you do have them, they don't always have the right talent, the right skills. And secondly, culture and engagement. Actually, that was the largest discrepancy, as employers are increasingly aware that we have to be building long-term relationships with our employees the same way we build long-term relationships with our customers or potential customers, and that we need to deploy technology intelligently to do this. So on the technology front, we think this is a good area to be investing in, to be building companies in. Employers are ready, willing, and able to spend more money on technology in order to solve these problems. Without running through this whole slide, generally, the vast majority of employers are either increasing their expenditure on HR-related technologies or maintaining them consistent. Within human capital, the largest areas, the HRS, the Human Resource Information Systems, those are the systems of record. That'll always probably be the largest bucket. But number two, learning and development. That is an encouraging, slightly surprising and encouraging result and trend that companies are willing to bucket so much of their human capital spend, actually as much as payroll administration, on learning and development. There's a trend toward, this is also preaching to the choir, I'm sure, but we're still within HR. HR is behind other parts of the organization in terms of moving to the cloud and deploying things like social and mobile. That is not going to be true for long. Insofar as employers are still on premise, we're seeing a massive shift toward the cloud. We're seeing a massive shift toward mobile adoption. Huge percentage changes every year in companies that are using mobile interfaces and are mobile accessible with HR, as well as other areas. And then, if I can get to this, we do think that there is an exciting opportunity within analytics, where this shows the difference between the percent of companies that think analytics within talent is really important to their future, and what percent feel like they're doing it well now. You could drive a truck through, 64% say this is going to be really important, only 4% think they're doing it well now. We think this is going to be an important area for the future. And by the way, literally, if you had dropped the slides on the floor and scrambled them, I have no idea how they got to be in this order. It's truly bizarre. But within that, there's a lot of conversation, not just in this area, but in general about analytics and artificial intelligence. We do think there's opportunities within artificial intelligence. However, interestingly, the pieces of the talent puzzle that companies are saying they find the hardest to solve are not the ones that you can fix with machine learning, at least not today. Things like creativity and innovation, extremely important, extremely difficult to find. Leadership, also, you can use machine learning to improve leadership, but that is a truly human quality. So we think the world is set up for being able to leverage machine learning and analytics to improve, to address all these issues, but that we are not at a phase where we're going to be significantly replacing people. Companies are still viewing their human capital as a very important resource and are willing to invest their dollar capital in order to keep improving the quality of their human capital. So with that, rather than trying to scramble to a different slide, I will end. If there are any last questions with the last minute we have.
Really, the learning development, the productivity, disruptive, like you talked about AI, you talked about virtual reality, some of the disruptors that are really going to kind of bring us to the next place and kind of get through this kind of place where we're kind of not moving to a new place, but can we really make that jump?
Sure. So first of all, it's great to have you ask me a question for a change. So I probably asked Beth 300 questions over the years. So there are two pieces to it. There are new learning interfaces so that, right now there's sort of there's the technology-driven formal learning, so within the LMS, which is generally used only for compliance purposes. Then you have the informal, people get together. I think there are ways to use technology to set up new sort of meeting places where you can find the right resource at the right time to answer the question that you may have. So technology to make the learning more just in time, as opposed to and relevant as opposed to once a year, that kind of thing. The second piece of it is measuring and managing informal learning. So how do you figure out what your people actually know, not just a resume, but well beyond that? What do they really know? And then given what they know, what's the next thing that they should be learning in order to progress in their career? And that is not always the same answer at every employer, even within the same team, within the same employer. So those are two areas we think. Yeah. We're out of time. We are out of time. However, I'll be here so we can talk. Thank you all. I appreciate your forbearance. If there's any questions, as I said, would love to get you all on my research distribution list, so give me cards. Happy to share cards, and I'm around if you'd like to talk. Thank you.